Good afternoon, first grade. Today is Wednesday, and we are in the middle of Holy Week. Tomorrow is Holy Thursday, and Holy Thursday is when Jesus had his Last Supper with his disciples and told them about what was going to be happening to him and how the world would be afterwards. So, since we don't have school on Friday and Monday, since it's our spring break, we're going to do some eggs, multiple eggs today and multiple eggs tomorrow. So that way we are kind of like ahead of the game. So our first one today is going to be the cup, and it's in a light purple egg. So it says, "And he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying," now this is what we hear in Mass, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin." Now, when we go to Mass on Wednesdays, that's what Father Conrad says when he blesses the wine or the blood. So here is our little cup or chalice. So this is what we see at Mass on Wednesdays when we go, and this is what we get to drink from when the adults, or if you're second grade and up, get to go and receive the blood of Christ or the wine. So, Jesus had a special dinner with his disciples, 12 of his closest friends who traveled with him and learned from him. During the meal, Jesus stood up and held out a cup and gave everyone a drink. Then he said something that was hard for them to understand. So they didn't quite understand this. He said that the wine is the cup, and the cup was his blood. He didn't mean that they would actually be drinking his blood, but that the wine was a symbol of his blood. So he didn't actually put his blood into the cup. The wine was meant to be a symbol, meaning of the blood, his blood. He wanted them to remember this special night and the covenant, or a promise, he was making to them and to all of the people. There we go. He's blessing the wine. So in this cup, when we drink from it, is not actual blood. It's wine. But the wine represents our promise and Jesus' blood that he gave for us. Okay. Next one is our orange egg. Our orange egg, we have praying hands right here. So a set of praying hands, they're praying. And it says, "And they went to a place called Gerasium. And he said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I pray.' And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to greatly distress and troubled. And he said to them, 'My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch.'" So here's our praying hands. It says, "After dinner with his disciples, Jesus took them to a garden. He asked them to pray while he went to another place in the garden to talk to God alone. He began to be sad and to dread what he knew was going to happen to him very soon, that he was going to die. Jesus was willing to die, for he once said, 'No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down for my own.' You see, one of the remarkable things about Jesus was that, like no one before or since, he was both God and man at the same time. The God part of him was willing to die because of his great love, but the human part of him did not want to experience the great pain he would be surely suffering by dying on the cross." So there he went to a special place in the garden to pray to God alone. Now we're going to do the green egg. The green egg has a whip in it, which is what they whipped Jesus with, and that's why he had all those slashes across his back and his side. So this is a whip. It says, "Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him," which is like another word for whipping. When Jesus finished praying in the garden, with our praying hands right here. The men wanted to kill him. The men that wanted to kill him took him as their prisoner. They then brought Jesus to Pilate, so Pontius Pilate, their ruler, and he had Jesus whipped. So they brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate, and he ordered his men to whip him. The whip used was long and hard, and it hurt Jesus so much that he bled. So that's why when we look at Jesus on the cross, you see slashes across of him, because those were caused from the whip that they whipped him with. Jesus hadn't done anything wrong. The men who wanted to kill him were afraid of losing power, so they wanted to stay in power. They didn't want to lose their power. So they wanted Jesus out of their way. They knew that if people really believed that Jesus was the Son of God, which he was, they would follow him. So they didn't want him to be followed. They wanted to stay in power, and they wanted him gone. So that's our whip. Let's do the crown of thorns. So this is what when we look at Jesus on the cross, we can see a crown of thorns. And think of you know what a thorn is. It comes from like a rose bush. And when you accidentally touch it, what happens? Well, you get like a little prick. And if you touch it too hard, you might poke yourself and start bleeding. So what they had was a crown of thorns, like basically like a big string of thorns, and they wrapped it up into a crown. And if you can see the little pokes? They took that and pushed that down on his head. And that's why you see blood running down onto the side of his face, because the thorns went into the side of his skin. So it says, then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! After Jesus had been whipped, with our whip right here, the soldiers took branches with thorns, twisted them into the shape of a crown, and shoved it down on Jesus' head. Again, Jesus bled. So usually a crown is something really special that kings and queens get, but this was a crown meant to hurt him. We know that because Jesus was the Son of God, he could have stopped the men from hurting him, but he let them continue. Do you know why? Because even though Jesus hadn't done anything wrong, he had not sinned, Jesus was taking the punishment for all the wrong things that any other person had ever done or would ever do. This includes you and me. So here's the crown of thorns, and here is the picture of them. Okay, that's where we're going to stop today. We have the crown of thorns, our whip, our chalice, and our praying hands. We'll read some more tomorrow.